All right, folks, welcome back to Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape. Uh, well, no, there we go. Hey,
Oh, we're
folks, welcome
live,
back.
baby.
Welcome back to Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape. We have episode number 56 today. What is God? The reason why we're going to do this podcast is because I was thinking about this the other day. You know, what everybody has different concepts of what God is and or who God is.
Yeah, it's a hard subject to actually articulate what you're thinking too. I started thinking about it, and it was, well, we'll get into it. Go ahead.
Well, no, yeah, but I mean, the premise of this is just that, um, it's like the same thing as consciousness. It's like, what is consciousness? It's like you get a million different answers from a million different people, and yeah, there's some similarities, and yeah, there's a basic gist to it, but
Yeah,
the actual definition that people will give you is usually different from person to person with a little bit of a variation. Same thing I find with, God, although there is a uniform, um, I believe, like a uniform sect of people that believe God is a bearded man in the
yeah,
sky, similar to like a Zeus looking character or something like that.
yeah. I
Odin,
think my
whatever.
mom fits into that category.
So yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of people do. You know, and I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think you can still be a good person. Some of those people are some of the nicest people that walk the planet, but it also can be used for not good things like predatory behavior and like you could control mass amounts of people by saying do this or you're going to go to hell or you're going to cease to exist or whatever the case may be. So is where it can be like, we've talked about this on the podcast before, something can be both good and bad by nature, the analogy I think we one of the early episodes we had Chris on were a car
Right,
can be used
right.
to save somebody and take them to the hospital, or it can be used to kill somebody, so um but what I think, when I think of God is more of like a pure energy, like some sort of like glue that holds everything together, that works its way through everything. Like maybe we are every single thing is God or a piece of God that's just all connected. Um, so that's kind of what I've been thinking about lately. What
So
are
you say
your
God, you say God is everything. That's what your
Well,
definition
okay,
is.
so there's different. Okay, so pantheism is the belief that literally God is everything. God is the rock outside. God is the water bottle next to me. God is me.
Uh-huh.
God, so that's the idea that there's some sort of level of consciousness on every for every object, inanimate, animate, whatever. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I
I,
also
I I would just say that's like energy. I guess that could be
right.
God.
Well, okay, so let's take a look at this from like a more scientific standpoint. We had Brian Keating on with talking about physics and the universe and his experiments and everything.
Yes.
And we were talking about the Big Bang and um, you know how that came to be, what could have possibly been before that, yada yada yada. Um, if you think about it from this standpoint, if there was a Big Bang, okay, um, and the energy is dispersing throughout infinitely, there was a point of high density mass or energy or whatever that exploded.
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Around the
so
size of a pinhead. I
okay, so maybe that is God or that was God or still is God, and that we if that was the case, we would truly do or would have a piece of that in us. So you could call that God and say we do have a piece of God because we are made up of the carbons and all the stuff that makes up stars. So
Yeah.
from that standpoint, we are a part of God. Um, you have to think though, like I was
Oh
trying
yeah.
to get.
Well, I was gonna say, where does the soul come from then? Because if you're because I don't, it's hard to connect the two when you say something was, it was a big ball of mass energy and then it exploded. Okay, that makes sense. But then where did this consciousness come from and this concept of understanding where that explosion came from and then thinking of how we were created and all that, yada, yada, yada.
Well, okay, so yeah, no, totally agree with you. I think um, when you're looking at it from
A
what I was
divine
just
spark, if you will.
okay, so those are two different things to me. It's like I've been looking at it a few different ways. One, I wanted to try and put myself in the shoes, not shoes, but try and think about like, and you can't do it, but just put yourself kind of in the mindset of somebody from ancient times or
The moccasins, yes.
2500 BC, 2000 BC, when these ideas started to arise. Um, what were people like thinking about? Like, where, because there's the people that argue against the idea of God. It's that it's like a flaw in human understanding or nature. You know, like it's something that we created.
So it's a hope to say, when you die, there's
It's not
more.
even a. I don't even think it's a hope. Um,
Well, hold on. This is my 2 cents. Humans are very unique in the sense that, well, we don't know if animals know this or not, but we're definitely certain that we know we will die. I don't think ants, bugs of that, and small animals are aware of that. Now, the fact that we're aware we're gonna die, that's a fear driving thought. So what do we do with fear? We create, we develop ideas that will extinguish that fear. That's where the
oh,
God comes in.
absolutely, and that could be, that could be the case. It could be a part of our evolution of how we survive. But those same people that say God doesn't exist also believe there is no point to evolution, which that doesn't, based on what you just said, those two things contradict each other because evolution signifies purpose. It's a reason for survival, you know? Like what is that reason if
So our minds growing to the level where now we can accept our creator kind of deal,
I don't
or
even know.
acknowledge that we had
Well,
a creator.
before we even get there, I'm just talking strictly. Okay, so you just said we created this idea based on our creativity of not wanting to die and just speculating and thinking, kind of like what we're doing now.
Well, let's let's
Okay.
let's let's say I didn't say we created. I said that's when the idea came about.
Okay. So
It's when our
okay.
minds develop to the point where we are aware that we will die.
Okay. So again, what I'm trying to say is like people like a Richard Dawkins or somebody like that will say there is no point to evolution. It's just a process, just like anything else. But
Uh-huh.
I think, yeah, or they'll say purpose is just a made up same thing, concept or whatever. These are things that we're giving meaning to that really have no meaning. They're just processes.
Yeah.
I to butt against that will say, well, then why does evolution move in one direction? Like, why is it constantly moving forward? Or you know what I'm saying? Like, even if it was just a process, there seems to be a rhyme and reason for it. You know, it's like
But is it moving forward? You're a big proponent of the old Egyptian. They had knowledges that they knew things that we didn't, and they might
okay,
have been a
so
bit
but
more advanced.
just because you evolve though physically doesn't mean that you're more evolved spiritually. So those are two different things in my eyes.
All right, all right,
Like the way that humans um live and like the technology we have to save people and bring people back from the dead. Maybe they had stuff like that. Maybe they understood. I don't know. I don't think there's any written knowledge of that. But
right.
from the standpoint that physically we have come, we're a little bit different now. I mean, I don't think that's even disputable. Like, even though it's been 5,000 years, 6,000 years, whatever, we've evolved in that time, you know? Um, that doesn't mean, though, that we have a better idea of spirituality or metaphysical things if they exist or anything like that, because back then you were confronted with things, like you were, either kill the this is a little bit further back than that, but kill the saber-toothed tiger or you die, or kill the woolly mammoth or you die, or kill this
Uh-huh.
other Neanderthal or Denisovan or you die, or whatever. So like part of our evolution has been do or die basically. And then we
Right.
got to the point where our brains allowed it to have some sort of like comfortability, like, yeah, we killed all those things that could have killed us, or there isn't this threat anymore. Maybe the threat is just other humanity, which it did become.
Mhm.
Um, but from the standpoint of when they were at nighttime. Okay, think about nighttime here. You look outside, like I live outside Chicago. If I look towards the city at nighttime, there's a red glow coming off the city, and you can't see any stars. It's just brutal. Back
Yeah.
then, you look up in the sky, you see every single star without even anything any light pollution, anything inhibiting your view. Um,
Yes.
so when you're staring up at the sky, that's why you see a lot of archaeoastronomy. That's why you see there was a connection. There was a connection. I could make the point there's people are connected were connected to the stars closer back then than they are now because most people don't even look up in the sky. When they do, they don't see the stars and the range of stuff that you could have seen back then.
Yeah, they just see it on their TVs and computer screens.
Right. And there's something awesome about that too, but I think most people aren't connected to nature and so like I think we've lost our connection to um
Let it out.
nature, like and I think nature, when you have to kill a chicken or you're working on a farm or you do something, I think you have a completely different respect for life and for just even a simple act of eating food than a person that's working their ass off 12 hours a day just grabbing whatever's closest,
Uh-huh.
process stuff. So I think it's a connection to things, and I think that we're less connected to the spiritual side of things and more connected to this other thing, which is technology.
Yeah,
So
keep yourself alive in this life as long as totally possible,
right.
you know?
But the other thing I think about sometimes too is like, maybe there's a reason for that too. Some people say we are in a simulation. Um, Maybe this move or we're being pulled towards this technology stuff, and advancements and AI and machine learning and all that stuff. Maybe that'll help us understand that we are some sort of simulation or program. And I don't think like a video game, like we have no meaning or anything, that maybe we are like the avatar for something bigger, like
Uh-huh.
maybe the real you's up in some booth somewhere looking down, you know what I'm saying? There's something along those lines. I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility. So I've heard people conceptualize the idea of God as like you know,
A
think of
controller.
yeah, or like not an algorithm, but like a processor, like some sort of mega computer, or
Yeah.
something along those lines. I've even heard people say that we could just be like a brain in a vat, that's being plugged into a machine. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
but
there's a lot of possibilities. I for one believe that it's some uh there's one main entity that we all return to. I don't think it's a man in the sky necessarily, but that concept helps people. I don't want to say with a smaller IQ, but people that aren't going balls to the walls with science, they can say, okay, here's a religion. There's someone that looks, similar to me. If God was like some just like a star or something, do you think people would have the same affection for him?
that's a good question. That's one of the um esoteric thoughts too, is that the son is the son of God,
Yeah.
like in the
Uh-huh.
Bible, like that's the concepts of so and if you think about it, without the sun, we would be nothing. We wouldn't have
Right.
any light. We wouldn't have any food. There'd be nothing growing here. So literally, the sun provides life. There's just no way to dispute that.
Right, but
Um,
also too much of it, you'll get the cancers
well,
and
yeah, well, like anything in life, too much of anything's pretty much bad for you. But
right.
that's a little bit different since it is the main source. But it's just like that's why I think a lot of people also think that we're maybe like an accident or this is just all a mistake. You know what I'm saying? So, um, there's two different schools of thought. But I mean, there's been speculation. I've seen some stuff that and it's some fringe stuff, but maybe stars have some level of consciousness, you know? They all have their own, we've talked about this, I think, a little bit too, like, each planet, each star has its own unique, like, characteristics, you know?
Yeah.
Saturn's got its rings and, you know, Jupiter's this huge gas giant, you know, there's everything's got its own little, um, you know, quirky thing to it. But, you know, that's a good question as far as if people would respond. I mean, what if that's, you know, like I've heard people say, or, you know, you see the light when you die, or people that have had near death experiences see these like white orbs. What if you do become light when you die? Like, what if your soul's just light, you know, and you know, that old thing, like, uh, what's it called? Like Native Americans think, you know, like when you die, I should say some Native Americans, when you die, you become a star up in the sky, or different
Yeah.
cultures. Same thing, you know, why wouldn't, you know, why isn't that a possibility? You know, it seems more plausible than some of the other shit people think, you know? So, um, hey, you know, that's just my take on that.
Well,
But so yeah,
stay on that light subject a little more. Did
well, I
you
was just gonna say, so the sun provides life, you know. So, um, in terms of what we are, I mean, we're just a bunch of particles vibrating at a certain frequency. You know, we're not. People think, yeah, we are a solid thing, but we are made up of all these subatomic particles. These little like they look like blurs or little gas clouds. You know, like most people think of an electron as this little spinning. You know, it looks like a little moon rotating around a planet or something when they think of like an electron, but really electrons are these little like probability clouds that stuff pops in and out of. So, um, I don't even know that we are, you know, like our perception is that this is all like this table's solid, this computer's solid, you know, we're talking through this physical material thing. But again, these are just particles that are constructed in a certain way that vibrate at a certain frequency. So,
right? Wasn't
um,
there a scientist who was doing some studies on like if inanimate objects had consciousness,
well, yeah, there's,
rocks and stuff?
well, I think there's, well, okay, so there's Rupert Sheldrake who, um, has a theory. It's called morphic resonance. He's been on different podcasts. I think he's been on Joe Rogan too, where, he's like a, I forget, like a Oxford or one of those top English schools. You know, he's educated. He's not some wackadoodle that doesn't have a good background. He's got a good background, but his idea is that inanimate objects can hold information. So like,
Right,
you know, like we talked about the music studios, like Muscle Shoals, like how when people go to record there, they say there's just this feeling, it's this thing, you know, like that could be the music or the vibration that's just soaked in that thing, or it could be the energy, the vibration. It could be a lot of things, you know.
right.
Um, and then his other work is usually generated. I think he did some studies on like if animals can detect if their owners are going to come home from work, or you know, and it wasn't the same time every day, and they had some sort of like ESP where they would know this person was coming home or coming home soon or something along those lines. So there's some, he was
Damn.
looking into like the connection between um you know, humans and animals and like psychic ability and like that kind of stuff. And they have done studies on that too, where I mean, everybody's felt this before, where you're standing there in a store or something and you feel like somebody's staring at you, and you look back and somebody is staring at you, you know. Um,
Yeah.
I think they've concluded that there's like a 54%, or a little, it's like a little bit higher than normal, but it's still higher, you know, that people can um, feel that and act on that. So, but let's get back to this God thing. So,
Yeah, I wanted to bring up this little article here. I don't know if you got a chance to check it out. Shared it with you, but like we were talking about the light thing. Can you see that?
yeah. Yeah,
So
I
like
saw that article actually.
so yeah, there's some scientific evidence that we may be fueled by light, or our consciousness is
So yeah,
directed.
that's all based on photons. There's what's his face? Sir Roger Penrose said something interesting when he was on Joe Rogan's podcast. Joe Rogan was asking him um, if he thought that there was life in the universe or could be life or whatever. And uh, Roger Penrose said something along the lines of like there could have been a previous eon or civilization before this universe. You know, maybe there was like a cycle, like there was, you know, an end of the last universe and then the Big Bang, and then this is the new universe that the
Uh-huh.
civilization alien civilizations in the previous one or civilizations in the previous one could have encoded everything in the photons. So like when the Big Bang happens, it's dispersing these photons throughout the universe, and that's all the information and stuff from the last universe, if that makes sense.
But okay, so they encode the photons. I'm assuming they give them, human DNA or whatever the particles that would eventually become
Well, I
human.
mean, just in there's just information encoded. So, like, you know, when you
It just it,
meditate, well, when you meditate, you see certain things. When you do psychedelic, anything that takes you out of your everyday consciousness, people see and feel and hear weird things. So, is this information, you know, from the past? I mean, I don't necessarily buy that. You know, I think it's more plausible that something's happening within this universe than something along those lines, even though we can't find it, you know? I mean, but so I mean, that's the other
that's
thing,
pretty
you know.
interesting though. I like
So
that.
but the other thing is like our could we be the gods? You know, like we've talked about this, the you know, the Urantia papers and stuff. The Urantia papers premise is basically that we all have this divine or piece of God with divine spark or piece of God within us. And it's our job to um, combine with this piece with what we are um, to form this like complete human being, basically. And when that happens, you know, we ascend and everything to the different levels.
Right, right.
But here's the thing: is so like the other thing is that it talks about though is how God is everything, and that's why you see so many different variations. Like you don't see two of the same people. You don't see two, you know, everything has a little bit of a difference or a little bit of a variation, even if it's the slightest, because it's God. Think of God as this like bored creator, and he's just, you know, wouldn't you create something that would create something or create something, whatever, in this long line of stuff that would always be pushing towards this goal or this, you know, pushing in one direction. So it's never the same thing. So, I mean, I think about it like that. Like, if there was a creator, he wouldn't, even though he knows the beginning or the end or all that stuff, like what you would want it to be different, you know? It's like watching a TV show, you know, you're going to keep watching the same TV show or you're going to watch different episodes, you know?
Right. So you saying that he created dinosaurs first and then said this is a shitty program and then turned it off and
Could be, could be. Or that could just be like, I think that's the other thing too, is like everybody's got a different idea. God, some people don't even think the dinosaurs existed or are some sort of
hey, yeah,
fabricated thing.
yeah.
I'm not in that school, and I don't necessarily agree with that. But I mean, I respect everybody's right to believe whatever they want. You know, like you made me watch that fucking. Um, uh,
Oh, whoa, whoa. I
you,
did it too, bro. I
eh,
just did it too, man.
you made me watch that that movie.
I didn't
What
make
is
you
it?
watch anything. Let's
You
get
made
that
me
right out
watch
of
it. You
the
put it on. You held my eyelids back, and you made
way.
me watch it. No, it was that. What is Genesis or you know, is that
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah. I remember
is this
that.
just okay? So, and the guy was talking about how the Grand Canyon was carved out in like a week or something like that, and it didn't take
Well, there was rapid
thousands.
erosion
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
took place.
So, and all this stuff happened 6,000 years ago. So, I mean, yeah, I don't, I don't think so. I mean, we can measure things, you know, like
Yes.
I don't, I we poo poo science sometimes, but I think when we poo poo science, it's more poo pooing some of their concepts and ideas, you know, like it's um not what they're talking about from a science standpoint, but like their personal beliefs and what they're doing. You know, they don't have a and I don't want to say all of them, but what are the Brian Keating said, like 70% of scientists are atheists. So it's like you're already not believing in something. And I'm not saying you have to believe in God either, but everybody should be open to the idea since we do have no idea what's going on.
Well,
The fact
that's the thing. They're jumping to a conclusion. That's the conclusion they're coming to, and it's not. It's
and I
based in
think but
some
I think the
kind of
problem I feel like I said, I think it's an error in that's like a character error though, because it's not in like the science is fine. I get it. You've got to do scientific method and you got to perform the same experiment over and over and over and measure it. And you can't add anything to the results or deduct anything from the results. It is what it is. I understand that. That's not what I'm debating. There's still human error behind those experiments and human um, bias and ideas behind. So that's where I have a problem with. I don't have a problem with the science itself. I have the problem with some of the people that are interpreting that science. But
right, right.
that's a whole different story. But
Well, it boils down to you have to, like I said, you have to jump to a conclusion. You either have to jump to a conclusion of it's purely based in science and there is no God, or you jump to the conclusion of God. At this point, they're
I
both
think you can believe in
kind of
both,
far
though.
out, you know.
Well, I mean, but for me, that's what I'm trying to say is like I believe in both. I do. I think that it's possible to measure things and to understand things, and to also understand that there's things beyond this realm and beyond this um, understanding of life. Like
Right.
even just the fact that, like I said, okay, so we can only perceive like five. Let's just be generous and say 5% of the universe. It still leaves 95% of the universe with dark energy, dark matter. Like as much as we pretend like we know so much about the universe, we've never even gone to another planet.
We
Seriously, like think about that. Like there's scientists right now telling
never
you
been to the moon, bro.
there's scientists telling you that
I know,
and
it's pretty
it,
ridiculous.
it's fine because like I said, I understand it and I do like a lot of the ideas and the concepts, and I think there is a lot of truth
Well,
and a lot of
they have to formulate the thesis. That's their
right,
job.
right,
So
right, and I get it, but what I'm saying is like we haven't even gone to another massive body similar to ours, and we know that we're in a solar system. So even if we had just left our solar system, I would be saying the same thing because of the um just the vastness of the universe. It's infinite. It's so big you can't even conceptualize it.
yeah.
We
Oh
are
yeah.
just at one grain of sand on every single beach in the world. Like
My brain's starting to hurt again, man.
it's literally nothing. So but yeah, I think and then it gets down to um dimensions. Like the idea now is that there's three dimensions and the fourth dimension's time space, and that's it. But I I mean, I'm not a genius or anything, but I think that there's a possibility that there's more dimensions than that, and that those dimensions, um, are just unknowable or invisible or whatever you wanna say to us in that state. So, when you look at psychedelics, or, like, let's say somebody doing DMT, I know that there's a lot of, like, hoopla, "Oh, it's a different dimension." It could really be this thing that strips down what we know as pareidolia, or this, like, pattern that we have where we, like, all we do is put patterns together as human beings. If I see, a certain amount of, lines in a row, I'm gonna, connect the dots. That's just what we do. So,
Mhm.
our mind works that way too, where, I think, is it 50% of, um 50% of vision's based on memory. It's not even what you're actually looking at the time. It's what your
Right, right.
brain's formulated to. So from that standpoint, I mean,
Well, what's a scientific explanation for these other dimensions? Like if we can't experience
well, it
them, then
depends on what
what are
you
they there
believe,
for?
because like the Big Bang theory, a lot of those
Awesome show, awesome show.
the cosmic microwave background, like all that stuff. There's different schools of thought. So then there's like the multiverse theory, which we talked about on that episode, where there's always like think of like a bunch of little bubbles, in vastness, and sometimes those bubbles bump into each other, and you know, stuff creates these, you know, universes or big bangs or different
Uh-huh.
things. Think of then the other thing is you got string theory, which is that, like Mamio Kaku, or some of these different scientists think that we're like everything's on these like strings basically, and that there's instead of 3 or 4 dimensions, there's 11 dimensions. Uh, and the ones that we can't see are part of this thing called like a Calibi U manifold, which are like these dimensions that collapse. It's like you know, um, I'm not explaining it that well, but so
Well,
there's a
don't look
lot.
at me, man.
So no, so for string theory, and there's a lot of people that say it's done, it's over, and then but this is what's so frustrating. It's like, what are we supposed to believe when some of the most intelligent people are saying one thing, some of the most intelligent people are saying another thing. These people over here are saying something completely different. Like, who are we supposed to
Well, we
believe?
gotta find your own truth. That's
Well,
the
and that's what it comes down to. So if you believe God is within every one of us, then I mean, look, I think we've all, and I can't speak for everybody, but I know you and I have talked about this when you are listening to music or you're playing music and you hit this like harmonic convergence and everything's feels right at that very specific time. You get the chills,
a feeling, yes.
So since we've been doing this podcast, I'll have like epiphanies about ideas where the same thing will happen. So when I think of God, I think of things like that, where it's like a synchronicity, or some people call coincidence, even though I don't believe in coincidence. That you get this feeling that's just it overtakes you, and I don't know. I would like to know from a perspective of somebody that doesn't believe in anything metaphysical or spiritual, what they believe in stuff like that is, because
Uh-huh.
I don't, I get that just on faith alone and all that stuff, like, because, yeah, you can't really, you got to do your own research and you got to look into things. But from a standpoint of like, there are people that have near death experiences that still don't believe in God and stuff like that. And that's fine. Like I said, that's fine. But I'd like to know what their process of thinking is on that, how something they could experience something profound and still not believe in some sort. It doesn't, like I said, when I think of God, I don't think of like a bearded dude in the sky playing chess with human beings. I think of him as like a heatless light, or some sort of pure energy or something, like the glue of the universe kind of a thing that runs through all of us. Like, that's what I think of as God, just connecting so, but
Yeah,
um
that's pretty cool. We were watching the first season of True Detective again last weekend, and that last episode when he's talking about when he passes on and he feels a warmth, or he felt the presence of his daughter and stuff like that. It kind of sounds along the same lines as what you're describing. Um, yeah, for me to sum it up, I believe there's an entity out there that we in the state we're in now, we really can't fathom it. So I don't have a problem with people believing that it's a man in the sky or whatever, as long as you're doing good and you're striving to be your best person. I don't think that it's as crazy of a judgment where you're gonna have a tally at the end, but I think overall your life you can kind of tell if you're a good person or not.
are
I don't
you a
know.
good person?
Yeah, and again, I'm getting better every day, Michael.
um I think I think the
It is an
problem
abstract concept, though. It's hard
I
to
think
kind
there
of
I
verbalize.
think there's a couple okay, so let's just jump into religion for a second. I think the
Whoa.
problem with religion is that there's this conduit, and this conduit's been contaminated over time, the priests and the pope and all this stuff, corruption and disgusting acts and behavior and different things, and just
Yeah.
some of the worst stuff. It's the conundrum, because it's like something that's supposed to be the most pure and the most good and has become the most evil. And I'm not saying don't go to church. I'm not saying that at all. I was raised Roman Catholic, and I think it had a good impact on my character as being a good person and caring about people and stuff like that. In terms of the structure, though, and the infrastructure of it, I think it's completely flawed from the top, and then it works
Yeah.
its way down. But when you get to an individual person level, I think there's still a lot of good people that just want to be good people and move on with their life. The problem I have is when people take the Bible as literal or word for word, because I don't think those people understand how the Bible was written. Like
Uh-huh.
for instance, the Old Testament, yeah, it's predates Jesus, it's BC, everything. Um and there's a lot of concepts in there, but those concepts are different than the New Testament. So the concepts in the Old Testament is basically there's this one God and you better worship him, or you know, you're in trouble because, I am one God. There shall only be one God. You shall not take another God's name. Like all these different things. It's almost like if you did create everybody, why are you so self conscious? Like that's what I think of when I think of the Old Testament, is this like vengeful, do this, it's my way or the highway kind of a thing. Um, to me, that sounds more negative. It doesn't sound very pleasant, or so when you look at like, who's writing these things, well, yeah, they were stories of prophets and just stories that people um passed along and handed down, and traditions and oral traditions and different stuff. And then you get to the New Testament and it's like, oh, God loves you, you're, the Lamb of God and this and that. So Paul, who's the first to write about in the New Testament, started writing about Jesus in 75 AD, I believe, 75, 80 AD. Jesus was already dead for like 30 or 40 years. So he didn't even know Jesus. So um the thing is all these stories are written by people that, didn't even really know Jesus, or they're um it's stuff that's been passed on, or what,
Right,
like
yeah.
you play telephone
Yeah,
and
yeah, exactly.
the game just keeps getting bigger and there's more errors and different things.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then you got the Council of Nicaea, and you've got um all that, where they decided what are they going to put in the Bible, what are they going to keep out of the Bible. So like stuff that was originally in the Bible isn't even in the Bible anymore. So it's this revised version where you're not even getting the full picture, and they're written by so many different people. To say that it was written by God or influenced by God, well, then you would have to believe that God was within all of us, or God is this thing that's pushing everybody in the same or in a certain direction, or so that's the
Right,
problem I have.
which isn't true because all the other religions believe that their God's doing the same for them, so
Exactly, and that was my always growing up, going to Catholic school and stuff. That was my biggest
name
problem.
drop.
That was my biggest problem was who's right. Like how we're going to go to heaven and all these other people are going to go to hell just because they believe something different, like that was my first thought into like, man, this might be some bullshit, so and I'm not saying again religion's bullshit. I'm just saying the way that it's being taught is bullshit on a certain level. When you take something word for word that's meant to be an allegory, that's a collection of stories, like I guarantee you, if you polled most Christian people, and I mean, I guess this goes for most religions too, same thing for all the major religions. But if you mostly Christians and said who wrote the Bible, well, they'd say Jesus or God, or they wouldn't say, it was
Brian.
it was Paul in the New Testament or anything like that. Like, they would tell you that it was, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is most people just don't have the background and understanding, and they don't look into it either. Like when you go on, um, you know, Reddit, and you go like I followed the religion and the Christian or Christianity thread, just to see what it was about. And then there's people saying, things like, "Oh, I'm gay. Should I come out or am I going to go to hell?" and stuff like that. And these people would jump on and be like, "You are going to
No,
hell." You know,
no.
these people would like jump on and be like, "You are going to hell." And I would send a message. Well, I would say, "Well, life's not that simple and it's complex and you're probably fine as long as you're a good person and do the right thing." People are like, "That's not how it works." Like, "Yeah, bro,
Yeah.
it actually is how it works because if there is an afterlife, it's not going to be, you know, exclusive to the people that took the Bible word for word, considering it's not even written by one person. So,
What about all the
um,
what about the 2% of all other living organisms that demonstrate homosexual behavior?
well, I think it's 10% of mammals, but yeah, I think,
Watch
I mean,
out.
there's animals that can have babies themselves. I don't, I think is it
Well, they got
snake?
asexual
Yeah,
animals. That's
yeah,
what
or
we're
and
talking
I think
about.
seahorses, male seahorses have the children, stuff like that. But anyways, my point was is you go on these platforms and like you would think that if you know something and the internet has just become ridiculous. It's just toxic wasteland of negative comments. So whenever I comment on
Yeah,
things, instead of like getting in a fight with people now, I'll just send something positive like, "Oh, I hope you have a better day" and stuff like that. And surprisingly, some people have responded well to it. Some people got even more pissed off than they already were. So I think it's a balance of things. But my point was is that some of these people on their way of thinking is just so um so monochromatic
one-sided.
or mono, you know, yeah, it's just it is it's one-sided. Like they don't have any scope of like what they're actually thinking about or looking into, and they most of them don't even look into it. I don't know how you can believe in something and not really look into like the logistics of it, you know, with the access that we have the internet today.
'Cause it's easier, man.
Like,
You
I
know.
I don't have a problem that people if you believe in God and you think the Bible is the greatest book that's ever written, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. When you say the Bible is verbatim, word for word, should be taken seriously, then I do have a problem because that's not true. It can't be.
Yeah.
So that's my problem with that. And I have a problem with it. People don't want to listen to other people. You don't even have to debate, but just like listen to what this person has to say, you know?
Well, that was the point I wanted to make. If us as humans are evolving, then why shouldn't our religions be evolving with us?
Oh, they absolutely should. Um,
Boom! I said it.
so that's a good point. It's, you know, and I like I was just saying, you know, why is, you know, one group of people special or more special than the other where, you know what I'm saying? So I think that that makes a lot of sense in that regard because it can't be there can't be you know like Jehovah Witness or different, you know, what is it, you know, all the like the ones where it's like you have to do this or we are only
There's a
allowing a
lot of
certain
them like that.
well, I'm just saying there's only we're only allowing this certain amount of people into God's kingdom, and the rest of you are going to live on the earth and live in this um, heaven on earth. But so the select few go up with God, you know. So it's like um, I don't know. I just think that it's kind of ridiculous, and even the people that have been on like these shows on TV where they've you know it's like people that are surviving a cult and different stuff like that. It's like those people when they're in it, they have no idea that they're in it, which is shocking to me, but I guess we are suggestible as human beings to certain ideas if it's presented like if you were raised that way, you know? Like
Hmm.
if you're raised, you know, you were raised somewhat religious, right? You know, your mom and
Yeah,
you
but
guys
she
went to
got more into the non-denomination, so it was like it was separate from all that. You don't have to do anything. You just got to believe in Christ was our savior. You don't have to follow all the whatever the stuff that the
right.
Catholics
Okay,
do.
so but so at what age did you start to think, you know, not necessarily that you don't believe in God, but just like start to question, you know, stuff along those lines?
As a teenager, 15, 16,
And what
when you
do you
start.
remember? Do you remember like was there something specific that happened, or was there?
No, I just
Uh,
started reading like Siddhartha and stuff like that. And you go, wow, there's other views on afterlife and God and that kind of thing. And everybody can't. There's not one that's to me. I was just like, not one of these is right. They're probably all there's a truth within all of them. And
right.
I wasn't. fully like I didn't dedicate my life to investigate the stuff. I just figured if I lived a good life, and I always believed in Jesus Christ was, a guy, and he came, and I don't know if he was the savior, but he did a lot of good, and he gave a code that if you live by it, your life will be better, I think.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that don't believe Jesus was a real person. I am not that. I think Jesus was a real person. Do I think that he had magical powers and was doing crazy stuff? I don't know. I don't think so. But
Yeah.
this idea of this man that, lived a perfect life in sense of helping people and being compassionate and teaching people and learning all these ancient ways and wisdoms and becoming this like mature spiritual force, I can get behind that. And the fact that we're still talking about him, you know 2000 years later, should be a testament to just the concept of this perfect person that, so whether he was the son of God or not, anybody that could live in that manner should be at least considered somewhat divine.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say with that mumbly response. Way to
um
articulate it, my man. Thank you.
so you know I just think that there's a lot of stuff out there that people can research, and I think people should. I think you should have continuous learning throughout your life. I don't think that's once you get to high school you should stop, or once you get through college you should stop, or whatever. I think it's something that, we're on this knowledge quest. We're doing these podcasts, we're interviewing people, we want to learn, we want to know, like, and I know that some people don't care, or that's just not part of some people's life, and that's fine too. But the people that do care, the people that do look into religions and God and gods and all the sorts of different things, um, they should have an open mind, and when they go in, try and discern, okay, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? Is this something that aligns with stuff that I've learned? And truth is evolving for everybody too, like personal truth. Like, just because you believe something today doesn't mean you'll believe it tomorrow. I've
Mhm.
definitely been in that scope of things where I thought something to be certain or true, and then, learn otherwise after. So I just think that there's like a certain pride associated with religion. Like, people just don't want to let the idea go because that would mean that there's no purpose to their life. And I think it's contrary. I think by teaching yourself and, you know, reading books and looking into different cultures and looking into different religions and looking into different consciousness expanding, or, um, like going into different studies scientifically and different things, I think it'll just further propel stuff that you already know, or stuff that you don't know, that'll help you formulate your ideas. So I think this idea that um, I know everything I know because I read the Bible and went to high school or college I think that's bunk.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a big world out there. Get some knowledge in you.
So I just want to touch on one thing before we wrap it up here. This idea of um, polytheism or multi gods. You see Hinduism and, um, a lot of ancient, the old ways in ancient Egypt before Akhenaten, and after, polytheism. This idea that this god does this and this god does that and this god's known for this. Um, that could be a real thing. These could have been like, you know, the Steve Jobs of their time, creating some sort of amazing technology or something where, like, yeah, you wouldn't consider Steve Jobs a god now, because even though what he did was amazing, it wasn't anything beyond the scope of humanity.
Whoa, whoa,
So,
whoa, whoa! He didn't even. I mean, he had a part of it, but he had engineers behind him. Don't
well,
don't
but
get too crazy with
But
this
it's
guy.
it's it's a visionary thing. I think that's when people, okay, so you watch that movie, what's it called? Steve Jobs or Jobs or whatever, not the Ashton Kutcher POS,
No,
but
no, no, no,
the one with, what's his name, Michael Fassbender, where
Fassbender.
it's like 3 or 4 different scenes and they're these long, long scenes.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, you're right. There are the, what's the guy's name? Steve. or not Steve, the who's the guy that Seth Rogen put in the
I'm
movie? I forget.
horrible with
I
names.
forget Wozniak.
Yeah, yeah.
So like Wozniak was the one that designed everything, from the actual physical standpoint of it. But if Jobs didn't have the vision, none of that would have taken place. So yeah, some guy built something, but at the same time, he built it because somebody else had the forethought or the vision to
Yeah, I agree.
accomplish this thing. So, um, you know, and but the polytheistic standpoint on things is an interesting one because I do think that first of all, we all could be gods. We could be like baby gods. We could all be these infant souls that once we move on, we could become gods of other universes or other planets. And I know it sounds crazy. This is just outside the box speculation. Um, the other thing is like I said, the gods are what were considered the gods in ancient Greece and ancient Rome and ancient Egypt and all these ancient civilizations were just people that were so advanced or that had knowledge beyond their capabilities, and some people could look at like a Tesla or something like that and maybe say that. And Tesla did think he was in communication with something metaphysical. So some people think alien, you go on all these alien platforms, some people think aliens are the gods, manipulating and pulling the strings and doing all that. So I
Oh
don't
yeah.
necessarily believe that. I believe it's even possible to obviously have aliens and some sort of creator. We're all in the same boat. Maybe aliens are just aliens. They don't know anything about a god either. They're just more advanced technology wise.
Yeah. And but they also could be interdimensional
They could
and
be.
be,
Well, that's
there's
just
a
it.
lot.
Even if they were interdimensional too, there could still be other dimensions that they know about that we don't, and they could still not know about God. So it's just one of those things where we may never know, in this lifetime or the next or the next. And it might just be something that we're these infinite, energy
Vessels.
forces or souls that just keep moving on to these different realms. But that's why I think about this stuff is because we are here. We are living, breathing magic. We're talking right now. I don't if you sit here and you're listening to this and you just say to yourself, "Why am I here?" Just think about it for a second. Like, what are you? What are you doing here? What's the whole point of this? So that's why I don't subscribe to the dumb Earth theory or this is all an accident or anything like that because we're super aware of what's going on and we're all trying to figure it out. So that means that there's this like hidden Easter egg somewhere out there um, that we may or may not find.
Wow, perfect sum up, my man.
So that's it. We're gonna wrap it up, but we have a couple cool guests coming up here shortly in the next week or two, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Cheers.
Peace.